Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. This is Vienna with Glitter Baddies Boutique, and for today's video, before getting into it, I wanted to take a moment to thank everybody who has subscribed to my channel. You guys are absolutely amazing. We're almost at 2,000 subscribers, so thank you guys so much. And I also wanted to let you guys know what is in store for my channel here. So let's get into it. So hi, my name is Vienna. I'm the owner and creator behind Glitter Baddies Boutique. And for today's video, we're going to be doing Resin Tumblers 101. And I wanted to post today's video to let you guys know that I've been doing tumblers for about 2 years, resin tumblers that is. I've been doing resin tumblers for about 2 years now, and I know my YouTube channel and even my TikTok is mostly known for my snow globe tumbler tutorials, but I've only been doing this for about a year, which is crazy. But I really wanted to start educating those tumbler makers out there who may be interested in doing resin tumblers because I do them as well. I started back in 2020 at the peak of the pandemic, and I did it just as a hobby. And I was just starting out with tumblers that I had in the house, and I was starting with just selling to friends and family. And slowly over time, my work got spread around and by word of mouth, and I kind of grew into what I am today. There's a whole other backstory to that, but I don't want to get into it. I just want to let you guys know that if you guys have any questions, comments, drop them below. I'm always looking for new advice as well, so don't be afraid to give me some tips and tricks as well. And if you guys want to see anything specific, any specific designs or styles, techniques, let me know. But for today's video, it's just going to be a basic resin glitter tutorial. I'll be going over all the tips and tricks that I wish I knew when I first started. And we're just going to be doing one glitter on this one, but don't worry, we have tons of videos planned for ombres and peekaboos and anything you guys can think of. I've probably done it, and we'll get into all of that later. So without further ado, let's get into today's video. As I mentioned in the beginning of the video, I will be giving you guys as many tips as possible that I wish I had known when I first started. So here's tip number one. You're going to need tumblers, obviously, but I like to buy pre-sanded ones. This is not required. They are a little bit more expensive depending on the vendor you go to, but sometimes you can get them on sale. But regardless of the price, I still would prefer buying pre-sanded tumblers. That's just a personal preference, but I buy mine from Maker Flow Crafts. They come in these nice little boxes. They include the care instructions for you to provide to your customers, which is super helpful. So you can see how that looks here. And then this is not the same size, but it is a regular stainless steel tumbler, so it is not pre-sanded. I just wanted to show you the difference between the two. And just know for the remainder of the video, I will be working with the pre-sanded tumblers. But again, I just wanted to show you guys how a regular stainless steel tumbler looks compared to a pre-sanded one. You can see this one has a nice glossy like look to it. That's how they are manufactured. The 20 ounce, which is the pre-sanded, has a little bit more of a rough texture because it is pre-sanded. And the reason you need a sanded base or at least some type of prep done on these tumblers is because your glitter and paint will adhere much better to a base that has some type of prep work done to it. So continuing on, I'm going to show you how I would typically prep a tumbler that is not pre-sanded. I typically buy my 20 ounce skinnies, my 30 ounce skinnies, my 20 ounce classics, and my 30 ounce classics, all pre-sanded because those are my most common sizes. And then not all sizes are available pre-sanded. So I just want to show you, in case you have a tumbler that is not pre-sanded like mine are, how I would typically prep them. So this is a 14 ounce thick, again, from Maker Flow Crafts. And this is going to be used in another video, but again, I'm just showing you the prep work that would go into prepping a tumbler. So I have a 60 grit sanding sponge. You can use any type of sandpaper, anything you would normally sand with. Wear your gloves because it does get a little messy, and just start sanding it down. There are tons of videos and different ways to prep your tumblers. You can see all that like stainless steel coming off on the gloves there, which is why I say wear your gloves. But there are so many different ways to prep your tumblers. But for me personally, I just like to add a little bit of roughness to it. I will show you a side-by-side comparison again between this cup that I just prepped and one that is not prepped. So after prepping it as much as I could with my sanding sponge, I go ahead and just wipe it down with some rubbing alcohol because you don't want those particles to mix in with your paint. So just wiping it down briefly, and then here is a side-by-side comparison of the same exact size, but a prepped version, the way I prep, and then the way it came in. So you can see the difference between it being prepped and not prepped. So your paint is gonna adhere much better to your tumbler when it doesn't have that glossy coating that's manufactured with it. So that is just tip number one. You can ignore my foam rollers. I did get those from Amazon, but I insert my foam roller into my tumbler. So this is what it looks like. I'll be doing 3 different ways to adhere your glitter, the 3 most common ways. And this first one is the way I prefer. I'm going to be using the wet paint method to adhere my glitter. So I'm going to be using spray paint. This is the glitter of choice, which is Mint Frost from It's Pretty Personal. And then I'm going to seal it over with some clear glaze spray paint, which is essentially just clear spray paint. You can probably use Rust-Oleum. I've used that before too. So any clear spray paint is gonna be just fine. So I'm gonna spray paint my tumbler, which I already did before this portion. So the paint is still wet in this portion of the video, and I'm just going right over that base with my glitter. So here's tip number 2. I would highly suggest matching your glitter and your base to be somewhat similar or identical. That way you use less glitter. When I first started, I was just using white spray paint as my base and having to do like 4 or 5 coats of glitter to get full coverage. This is 1 coat of glitter and it looks pretty much full. Granted, I didn't have a matching mint color to go with the Mint Frost, but this is the look I was going for. So anyways, here I am spraying that clear spray paint over the entire tumbler, giving it a nice thick coat. I will repeat this process about 2 to 3 more times, depending on your glitter size. A chunkier glitter is gonna need more coverage to seal that over and make sure that you don't have anything sticking up. I won't show that for each of the tumblers, but just know when I say spray seal, that's what I mean. So anyways, here I am using my little vacuum. I can link this below in the description as well, but it's a nice little vacuum I got off Amazon to kind of clean up my glitter. And here we are going into the second tumbler. So for this one, I'm going to be using a smaller cut glitter, a French lilac base or a lavender base with this lavender goddess glitter. And for this one, I'm going to be using Mod Podge to adhere my glitter. This was the method that I used when I first started doing tumblers, and it's probably one of the most common ways to apply glitter. So totally personal preference, but I did want to show this just so you guys could have some options and trying to figure out what works for you. It also does not need to be that specific Mod Podge. That's just the one that I have on hand, and then I'm going to be using a makeup brush to apply the Mod Podge, but we'll get into that here in a second. So here I am just dabbing my makeup brush into the bottle of Mod Podge. You can apply this however you'd like. This is just how I like to do it. You get less streaking this way. And some people will do 2 to 3 coats of Mod Podge. I only did 1 for this one. And you'll see the results at the end. But I will say I was very shocked that I actually liked how this tumbler came out compared to the other 2. This one took less layers, surprisingly. But anyways, we can get into all that later. So after applying my 1 thin layer of Mod Podge over my dried spray paint, I went ahead and started applying my glitter right over that wet glue. And you can see I'm just applying it all over, making sure that I get a nice full coverage. Now, if you do miss any portions of your tumbler that don't get covered with glitter, what I like to do is go in with that spray sealer, that clear glaze that I showed in the beginning, spray paint the entire cup, and then just apply glitter right over that and then spray seal it again. That is just how I like to do cover-ups and to do second coats if needed, but a lot of these tumblers that I did worked really well. I did end up doing a second coat for this one. I don't think it really needed it, but I just did it just to be safe. So I spray sealed it, and then I'm going in right over that wet spray paint that I sprayed over the glitter to apply a second coat. And you can repeat that process as many times as needed to get that full coverage that you are looking for. But this is the final result after that second coat of glitter. It looks absolutely amazing. This is not a super fine glitter, but it is smaller cut than the first glitter. So also keep in mind the way you apply your glitter is also going to depend on the cut of glitter, which I'll show you here in a second. So for the second tumbler, we're going to be using a dark icy purple base. And we're going to be using Scale Shifter from It's Pretty Personal. It is a chunky, fine mix of glitter. And since this is a chunkier cut glitter, I'm going to be using the epoxy method to apply my glitter. I showed you the 2 portions of resin that I poured. So I did 1 part A, 1 part B. I think I mixed about a total of 5 milliliters of epoxy, but I think I only used 2. So for the epoxy method, you're gonna go ahead and mix up your resin, part A and B. Make sure you are following the directions of the resin that you are using. The one I'm using in this video is not gonna be linked below, but I will share one that I do highly recommend in the description, so you guys can check that one out. It is available on Amazon. So again, make sure you are following the instructions of the resin that you use. But for this one, it is part A and B. I'm wearing gloves to mix this up. And I go ahead, after mixing it up, I go ahead directly over the tumbler and again, apply a very, very thin layer, almost as thin as the Mod Podge, very, very thin. You do not need a lot. So I'm gonna just gently apply this right over the base. Also, make sure that your paint is dried completely before going into this step. I would say at least 30 minutes to an hour before applying epoxy over wet paint, because resin or epoxy will not adhere to oils or paint. So again, make sure it is fully dry before going on to this next step. So once I have a nice thin layer all over the tumbler, make sure you get those edges. That's really important. I'm gonna go ahead and apply my glitter. You can see this is about how much I had left. So it was probably 2 to 2.5 that I actually applied out of the 5 that I mixed. Anyways, so here I am pouring my glitter directly over that epoxy. And for chunkier glitters, I would say the epoxy method is the best and easiest way to apply a chunky glitter on a tumbler. I really don't like working with chunky glitters. They are very messy and hard to work with over stainless steel tumblers, but I really wanted to use this glitter for a tumbler, so that's why I'm doing it. But you can use the epoxy method with fine glitter, chunky glitter, any type of glitter. It's just I prefer using it for chunky glitter specifically. So anyways, after I did 1 coat of glitter right over the tumbler, I'm going with my gloved hand and just gently tapping down any chunks of glitter. There's a little dog hair in my tumbler glitter there, so ignore that. That happens a lot, unfortunately. But anyways, so I'm just going in, tapping down any of those big chunky pieces of glitter that might be sticking up, because when I go over epoxy, you don't want to have any of those sharp edges poking out later. They're really hard to smooth out. So again, just gently tapping those areas. And overall, this one came out really nice at the end, but it did take me a little bit more coats of resin to smooth over, which I'll explain here in a bit. So continuing on, again, when it comes to epoxy, please read the instructions of the resin that you are using. But for this one, I mixed up a big batch of part A and B because I have these 3 tumblers on top of a few more that I'm working on. So I would say average for 1 coat of epoxy for your base, which is going to be covered in glitter, you probably need about, I would say, 20 to 30 milliliters of epoxy for your base coat. It really just depends on the size of your tumbler as well. We're using 20-ounce skinnies, so I would say about 20 to 30 milliliters for your first coat of epoxy is good. So again, because I'm working with a few different tumblers, I mixed up a big batch, which is what I'm mixing up right here. I do like to apply some heat with my heat gun. I showed it a few seconds ago. I kind of have it off to the side of my cup, and then sometimes I'll point the heat gun directly into the cup periodically as I'm mixing this. But I don't know if y'all can see it, but basically when you're first mixing it, it's gonna look pretty cloudy and foggy when you first start mixing up your resin. And I'm applying heat and mixing with this little mixer tool that I attached to my power drill. And I'm just gonna be mixing this until it's clear. You can start seeing the bottom here, so it's looking really good. Doing it this way, it takes me about 2 to 3 minutes to get this whole big batch of resin mixed up. So This is just one way of mixing, but if you're working with just one tumbler at a time, again, you probably only need about 20 to 30 milliliters for that first coat, which I'm going to show you guys here. And here it is, nice and mixed up. Personally, I go right in after I'm done mixing it. I kind of clean up my station a little, put my tools away, and go directly into applying the resin onto my tumblers. I like to pour just small portions at a time, and then just slowly, as you can see, just move that resin around. And pro tip, because we sealed with that spray sealer in the beginning, you do need to let that completely dry as well. It's just like spray paint. So when you go in with your spray sealer or whatever sealer you're using, make sure that it is fully dry before applying your epoxy. Again, your epoxy will not adhere or mix well with oils and paints and stuff like that. So just make sure that everything is completely dry before moving on to your first coat of epoxy. So I like to work in small portions again, and I'm just feeling around, making sure that there's no big bumps or big portions of glitter just poking out. So I'm just trying to make sure it is as smooth as possible. The purple one, again, is the Mod Podge one that we did in the beginning, the second tumbler we worked on. And again, it ended up being the one I liked the most, that the glitter adhered well to, and I was very surprised that I ended up liking it. But continuing on, I just repeated that process, applying my first coat of resin to this tumbler. The one that I did not apply resin to in this batch was the scale shifter, the one off to the right. Because we used the epoxy method to apply the glitter, we're gonna need to wait about 4 to 6 hours before you can go in with the second coat. Basically, just wait until that first layer of glitter is dry, because it's not glue, it's not paint, it's going to take a long time to dry. So again, follow the instructions of your resin that you're working with. I believe, if I recall, this was a fast set epoxy, so it only took 2 hours for that first layer to dry, and then I was able to go in and epoxy it until smooth. So these tumblers here are 2 layers in. So I applied 2 layers of epoxy. They look fairly smooth. They're not perfect, but they are smooth. And we're gonna go ahead and apply some decals. In this video, I'm not gonna show the decal process, but I will show you guys, after you have epoxied smooth, you need to go back and sand your tumblers. That is super important, and probably tip number 3 that I wish I knew when doing tumblers in the beginning. I used to not sand my tumblers, and I cannot believe I went that long without doing it. It is super important. It's gonna really help your tumblers get that nice smooth finish at the end. So again, I've done 2 layers of epoxy, or just epoxy until smooth before applying your decals. So I sanded down all 3 tumblers, making sure there was no sharp edges, and really make sure that you get those edges at the top, right where the lip is. You want to make sure you get a nice good seal on your tumblers. So I'm going in and smoothing these all out. You can also use your Dremel tool if you have one. I didn't get my Dremel until about a year and a half into doing tumblers, and it has changed my life so much. So again, not required, but highly recommended. It makes the sanding process a lot easier. So here's my Dremel. It looks pretty old, but it's really not that old. But I got this one from Lowe's. It was pretty affordable at Lowe's, so you can go pick one up there. They're even available on Amazon. And personally, I really like to use it not only for sanding the whole tumbler down, but really getting those edges. So it's a lifesaver, honestly. So after I've sanded down, I go ahead and apply my decals, resin until smooth again. And for this one, there was a little bit of a bump here and there, so I did grab my Dremel towards the end and just sanded the whole entire tumbler down. Again, just making sure to get those edges as much as possible. You really want to make sure that your resin is getting a complete seal over the entire tumbler. And I know it looks scary that I'm sanding over my decals and all the pretty glitter, but again, I do this in between each step of the way because I do want to make sure that I am getting a nice good seal over the glitter and the entire image as well. So I'm really sanding down good in between each coat, and you can see it looks pretty bad here, but I promise at the end it's gonna gloss back up once you start applying layers of resin over this. So do not worry about that. I know that's something I worried about and I didn't know was a thing when I first started. So don't be afraid to sand in between layers. It's gonna help. But for your initial layer, I would say 2 to 3 coats of epoxy or until smooth. Then you can start sanding down, because if you start sanding after your first layer of resin, it could mess up your glitter and your paint. So just make sure after your first coat of epoxy, do about 2 to 3 layers of resin, or until it's pretty smooth. Then you can start sanding and adding decals and sanding in between. But your initial coat, you need to make sure that it is nice and in place before sanding anything away. So anyways, continuing on, I do like to add my logo stickers to the bottom of my tumblers as well. This is not for advertising purposes. It's mostly for instructional purposes. Yes, it does have my logo so people can remember where they got the tumbler from, but it has the care instructions on each tumbler. That way no one can claim that they don't know or that they forgot, because it's directly on the tumbler. So anyways, after you are happy with the coverage and it's nice and smooth, you can go ahead and give your tumbler a nice wash. I'm not using an abrasive sponge. I'm using just your regular sponge and soap. And I'm using like lukewarm water. It's not cold, it's not boiling hot, because as we all know, heat can impact your resin. You don't want to use extremely hot water, but just your regular dish water is fine. And I'm just making sure that I'm getting all the insides. And I realized after recording all this that I did not film how to clean off the epoxy on the inside of your cup. So I am so sorry, but I will definitely show you guys that in the next video. Basically, I just used acetone to clean out any paint or glitter from the inside, and used my X-Acto knife to scrape off the edges to make sure that there was no epoxy left where it would be going inside the cup. So just keep that in mind, but I will show you guys in the next video on how I do that. Here is the final results of each tumbler after they have been washed. I absolutely love these. I think they came out great. I have tons of tutorials in store, so don't worry, there's plenty more to do. I think in the next video, we will be doing a vinyl wrap. It is another simple yet beautiful concept for tumblers. So something easy that I think anybody could do. It just takes a little bit of practice. I will say I still mess up sometimes, but that's okay. But just remember, practice makes perfect, and learn from the basics, start with the basics, and you'll be on your way. So I hope this video was helpful. If you guys have any questions, make sure y'all drop them below. As always, make sure y'all hit the subscribe button to get notified anytime I post a new video. Make sure y'all join our Facebook groups. We have a ton of creators who are more than happy to help, and thank you guys so much for watching.